Good afternoon, everyone. This is Fletcher Harper with Green Faith. I'd like to welcome you to the Green Seminary Initiative webinar on the Seminary Environmental Certification Program. We're looking forward to sharing the webinar with you today, and we'll start out with just a couple of brief housekeeping points. Everybody's lines are muted except for our speakers so that we can get a clear recording. We will make the link to the recording and the slides and the application materials that we'll describe during the webinar available to everyone who's registered for the webinar and publicly available after the completion of the webinar. We'll have time for questions and discussion at several points during the webinar. And I'd like to encourage all of you, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you should see a chat function. And I'd like to encourage you to send in questions using that chat function. If we don't respond right away, it's not that we haven't seen the question, it's just that we're waiting for the right time during the webinar to respond to it. So thanks very much again for joining us. We're really fortunate today to have 5 speakers. In addition to myself, Dr. Laurel Kearns from Drew Theological School, Beth Norcross from Wesley Theological Seminary, Stacy Keneally from Green Faith, and Sarah Macias, who is the coordinator of the Green Seminary Initiative. And we'll be hearing from all of them during the course of the webinar. You'll learn several things today. First, you'll receive an introduction to the Green Seminary Initiative. Secondly, we'll describe to you why seminary, based on what we've learned from conversations with seminaries, a certification program in this area for seminaries is the right way to go. We'll give you an overview of the Seminary Environmental Certification Program, the process, the support that's offered, the standards and requirements, examples or success stories of things that seminaries are already doing in these areas. And then we'll talk about the pilot cohort for this new program, the steps that interested seminaries can take to apply to be part of that pilot cohort, and the schedule for that. So now I'll pass the microphone over to Beth Norcross, one of the co-founders of the Green Seminary Initiative.
Well, thank you, Fletcher. Laurel Kearns and David Rhodes and I started the Green Seminary Initiative back in 2006, and I have to say, as a group, we're really excited about this new initiative. It seems to be the culmination of much of the work that we've been doing over the last several years. Our mission, as you can see on the screen, is to foster efforts, to encourage efforts by theological schools to not only green their buildings and grounds, but to actually infuse an eco-ethic on all aspects of seminary education. This is a joint program of both Drew Theological School and more recently Green Faith has joined us. So we have, we think, a really terrific partnership that's based in and through the seminary itself, and then bringing in Green Faith with all of its really practical experience on the ground. As I said, we launched in 2006. We've done a number of things. We've collected syllabi. We've collected stories from seminaries, what they're doing. We've publicized various environmental efforts, and we've been connecting seminary leaders with each other. That said, while we feel like we've been very successful in those efforts, we wanted to dig even deeper. We wanted to try to make even more systemic change. And that's where the certification program came about. We did, over the course of a couple of years, a series of these in-depth interviews with faculty, with staff, with students. And what we asked them was, what's going on in your school and how can we be most helpful? And what are the challenges that you're facing that keep you from doing this kind of systemic change that we're talking about, changing the culture and the ethos? What we found was that there was growing interest in creation care engagement in seminaries, but it tended to be a one-off thing. and it also tended to be managed by a champion or two. In the case of students, they graduate. In the case of faculty, they retire. And so they meet a number of different challenges. As I said, it tends to be led by one champion or two. There are all these competing institutional obligations. There's a lack of financial and staff resources. There was also a great need for discipline-specific knowledge. How do we do this within our own discipline? And then what we were doing an awful lot was, gosh, there's all of this to be done. How do we do it? Where do we start? How do we move through the process? And so we asked these folks whom we interviewed, how can we be most helpful? And we put forth a number of ideas. And the one that really popped, the one that they were most enthusiastic about, was this idea of a seminary environmental certification program, a place where they could go with a very specific process in mind that would tailor to their school, and it could help them move through the process in a systematic way. So the value of this program, the why behind this program, is that we're giving the schools what they've been asking for, which is a clear, precise, integrated approach. There are very specific requirements, which we'll go over a little bit later. It offers not only a specific path, but help getting down that path. It's targeted to specific institutions, has a lot of flexibility to it. And in particular, it allows seminaries to enhance their mission, particularly as it pertains to practical theology. What does this theology mean in the context of a warming climate? What does it mean in the context of species extirpation? This is an opportunity to really dig into mission and see how it plays out on the ground. It gives leaders of tomorrow the tools with which they can engage in this very important issue around eco-theology and eco-justice. We've already seen how it's helping recruitment. Younger students I know at Wesley are particularly interested in seminaries being more engaged and more relevant. It certainly helps with publicity. We are hoping that will help with funding. And ultimately, especially in the energy arena, will result in cost savings. Okay, Fletcher.
Great. Thanks, Beth. So next we'll talk for several minutes about the process for seminaries interested in this program and the kind of support that the Green Seminary Initiative will offer. And describing those pieces of the picture will be Stacy Keneally from Green Faith, who among other responsibilities has successfully managed Green Faith's environmental certification program for congregations ranging in size from 15 members to 5,000 members. So Stacy, you come to this with some experience. Share with everybody a little bit about the process and support that the seminary environmental certification will include.
So as you heard Fletcher mention, Green Faith has a very extensive program called the Green Faith Certification Program. This is one that spanned over 7 years and close to 100 congregations. And as part of this program, Green Faith has worked with the congregations to green their communities from top to bottom. We've learned a great deal from this program, and it's been tremendously successful. We have had hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings. Many of these congregations have invited new members into their doors, which of course, when you talk of a 12-member congregation, that's quite important. And all of them have seen really tremendous transformation through this program. They've had great success. And what we've learned through this program is that there are 3 main elements that are really important for institutional change. And we've brought those lessons into the seminary certification program. One of the biggest lessons, of course, is that a process is necessary to do this work well. You heard Beth mention a moment ago that oftentimes these can be one-off initiatives in seminaries, and our goal is to have it be a transformative endeavor, and the way to do that is through a process. The very first step of this process, and what it all really starts with, is building a stakeholder group and commitment from those stakeholders within the seminary. You can see there listed on the screen the various stakeholders that we recommend for this process, everything from faculty to students. It needs to be an inclusive process and one where those who have various responsibilities within the seminary are taking part. This is actually a step that you will do as part of your application process, and Sarah will describe this more to you in just a bit. The second main process step as part of the seminary program is to conduct an audit. And what we mean by this is that you go through a series of questions and you set up a series of benchmarks for your seminary. We provide the audit to you, it's self-guided, but this audit really helps you understand where you are currently so you know where you want to go with your efforts. We've done this audit as part of the congregational program. It has worked extremely well, and we've seen across the board when it comes to getting this work done well, an audit is one of the most foundational pieces. As part of the audit, you will look at the 5 focus areas of seminary life, which we'll get into in just a little bit: education, liturgy and ritual, buildings and grounds, community life, and public leadership. Once you complete your audit, you have a lot of really good data and research and just information about what is happening at the seminary and where there are growing edges within the seminary community. You can then use that information to build out an action plan, and we provide you a template for this as well. This will allow you to really sort of chart out and plan out the action you want to take over the course of your time in the seminary program. You can then share and discuss these drafts with peers, and of course, GSI is here to help provide feedback and guide you through that action planning process. Once you have a plan, you implement it. And throughout the process of implementing it, you not only have the requirements and standards that we allow you to sort of flesh out your plan, but we also provide you a lot of feedback and support all throughout the process so that you can do this plan really, really well and have great success. In addition, every 4 months, you'll check in with us about your progress. Of course, you can check in with us whenever you'd like, and we're always there with support, but every 4 months is the kind of benchmark of when you would submit some documentation of what you've done and let us know of your good work and good efforts. The last step really is that you achieve your certification, which is a really exciting and tremendous step in the process. You would submit your final documents around that, and then as part of the kind of closing of it, you would really think about the coming year beyond certification, and we would talk with you about how you want to continue your efforts and do this work. In addition, you would serve as a mentor to other seminaries who are perhaps in the beginning of the process or somewhere along the spectrum, and you would provide good insights and lessons from the work that you've done. And we would help you maintain your certification with a continuation of all of your greening of the community. Lastly, we don't just provide you the requirements and the process, we provide a lot of support in this program, and that's really important to understand. We in many ways are there with you along this road from start to finish to help you do this work well. We provide webinars like the one that you're on today, but of course other virtual networking and support and training materials all throughout your time in the program. We also provide one-on-one feedback and coaching on your audits, your action plan, and your progress reports. And we have a nice web portal that will provide you resources as well. So that way when you really need a template or you need a resource to help you do this work, you can jump into that web portal, find what you need, and then of course if you have any follow-up questions, we're there to support you.
Great, thanks, Stacy. And we'll now talk for a few minutes about the standards and guidelines for the certification program. I wanted to offer a reminder that if you'd like to submit a question for us to discuss or to respond to, please use the chat function, which you'll see at the bottom of your screen, and send us in a question in that kind of way. And to get us started with the discussion of the standards and guidelines, is Dr. Laurel Kearns of Drew Theological School, who's also a co-founder of the Green Seminary Initiative.
Well, first, let me just say how wonderful it is to be at this moment and to have so many of you here. And just to acknowledge that without Green Faith, we wouldn't be at this point. It's been a wonderful merging of interest and skills and ideas. Now, those of you who are familiar with us will already recognize these 5 focus areas because they've been our 5 focus areas from the beginning. And if you know our website, detailed information on it about how to work in these different areas. Now, I'm a sociologist, and so I have to issue the caveat that we recognize that these areas overlap, that education happens through liturgy and ritual, through how your building speaks and teaches, through your community life, and through your public leadership. But we tried to sort of break it down when we were thinking about standards and guidelines into distinct areas of theological education, recognizing that each institution is a little bit different, and so in working with you, that might look a little bit different. But so the first one is education, and we'll go to that next screen. Now here, when we're talking about education, at first we really are thinking about the curriculum. And I just lost my screen, Fletcher. I just see you. Okay, I'm going to wing it because I don't see the screen right now. Anyway, I know enough to, there we go. First of all, I want to say that we use this term eco-theology very, very broadly, recognizing that broadly understood, it's the study of how scriptures, theology, ethics, ecology intersect with the concurrent study of society, culture, and specific actions necessary to meet the kind of ecological challenges that face us. And that means that eco-theology has got to include some scientific understanding, but it also has to include a concern for justice, whether it's environmental justice or food or climate justice. But these are all elements of a broad eco-theological vision. But you can imagine if we put all of that each time we said the word eco-theology, the guidelines would get to be rather lengthy. So just remember that it's sort of a shorthand. And so the minimum, sort of what I'm going to give you a sense is sort of the minimum things we suggest. And then in each area, there are also additional activities that you need to meet. And those, you have a range of ideas. But we think that a minimum for a school to be certified to start in this process, or to be part of this process, is to have at least one eco-theology themed course taught each year, and remember my broad definition, that you also integrate eco-theology into a required course, however you might define that, required or core, and that your campus library provides material on eco-theology, and of course that can be a wide range of things from journals to books to films, but something that will back up the teaching. We also recognize that for faculty to do this, a school has to help them get further training and educational opportunities, or to have your key faculty work with others, because the goal is not just to stay with one eco-theology themed course, but to move it into more areas, into more offerings. And then we also recognize that in spiritual formation, and a key part of the education at many schools, to create and implement a spiritual formation plan that involves the natural world and the sort of eco-justice elements. So that what we recognize we are doing here is we are training religious leaders for tomorrow. And tomorrow's world is going to mean dealing with environmental issues, and often dealing with environmental despair or concern or injustice. And so that's part of our spiritual formation. To the next one, please. Now, these are just some examples, and indeed the fun thing of working on this for the last 10 years is learning all the different ways that schools are working at it. And so we have tried to make you aware of schools when they're having different speakers, special events, conferences that might provide an opportunity. We have a number of syllabi from scholars across the board. We try and make you aware of articles, journals, books that come out, and also seminaries that are already offering special programs, certifications, as one way to show that they're working on this broad task of education. And so here are just some examples. Some of these may be familiar faces and places to you, and others we hope you'll enjoy through our Facebook and our website, getting to learn about what other schools are doing.
We'll now turn back to Beth Norcross, who will take us through the next set of requirements. So Beth, over to you.
We're turning now to the requirements within the standards and guidelines which each school will need to meet in regard to liturgy and ritual. And I think what you'll see here in all of these areas is a twofold approach where we are dealing with both theory and practice. Certainly we want first for these themes to be integrated into all aspects of our educational programs at our schools. Someone asked a moment ago through the chat function whether the denominational requirements would be considered. Absolutely, and this is part of why each program needs to be tailored to a specific school, a specific denomination. So first in worship, we want to make sure that creation-related and eco-justice themed worship services are actually held so that students and faculty alike get a sense of how this is actually done in very pragmatic ways so they can then bring those back to their congregations. And then we would also then want eco-related confessions and prayers and litanies and hymns and so forth to be integrated into regular chapel services, not that one Earth Day service that many of us have, but what does it mean to look at creation as a resource in regular worship? And then on the theory piece, let's discuss these things. Let's teach creation-oriented liturgy in our classes related to worship. And that's what you see here. So that students begin to understand and get a handle on the wealth of resources that are available out there for creation-oriented liturgy and prayers and hymns and so forth. And then how do we include it in our hermeneutics? How do we preach the earth? Again, not on that Earth Day, just on that Earth Day Sunday, but how do we integrate it into our lectionary and into our theology as it's expressed through worship? Next, please. Here are just a few examples of the fact that this is already happening. And one of the beauties of this program is that we will attempt to network people who are interested through a mentoring program and through our own resources. So one of the things that we found in our surveys is that there's that lone green sheep at a seminary, and there's so many things going on that will provide sustenance and example and hope. So we hope to get you hooked into all of this going on around the country. You can see some fine examples here of places that it's already being integrated, creation care and engagement being integrated into worship at these schools in the photos. Now we'll shift here a little bit. We think that it's not only important for the schools to be integrating creation care, environmental issues into their own buildings and grounds so that for the impact itself, but again, to provide a laboratory to students so that they know how to do this and when they go out into their own congregation. So this will look familiar to many of you in energy conservation and energy audit. a requirement that schools meet at least a 10% carbon reduction, water conservation audits, a training for grounds crews and students, and reminders on how to save water, and a comprehensive integrated pest management policy, which would include native plants, which use less water, of course. Next, please. Again, in buildings and grounds, a waste audit. We're talking again about these series of audits that are so very important at stages to get a sense of where you are now, so that you can see where you've come from, celebrate these successes, and quantify these successes. We'll ask each school to develop a waste reduction plan, to use a high percentage. Well, the screen is on top of that slide. I assume that's high percentage of recycled materials in their materials use, and have and implement a policy of paper reduction. And also access to nature, so that the grounds not only are a place where we plant native plants and we reduce water and so forth, but it's a place where we actually have students have an opportunity, and faculty and staff, to experience the presence of spirit in and around nature. Here are a few examples again of where it's already happening. At Wesley, we have a LEED Silver certified norm, solar panels going up at San Francisco Theological Seminary, and the marvelous Seminary Hill Farm at the Methodist Theological School in Ohio.
I think we'll now transition over to Laurel Kearns, who will cover these slides.
Wonderful. And I just want to remind everybody that there is no way we can put on a slide the wide range of ways that we understand you might be working on these. So these are just little touch points in some ways to give you a sense of the kind of things we've been thinking about. And so I've been looking at the chat, and one of the things is the value of working with Green Faith is the connection with congregations. Your school might also have that. Congregations where this teaching will also take place, but sometimes recognizing that the seminary students who go out into the congregations, at least this is my experience at Drew, they're busy helping those congregations, and so they're getting that kind of field placement that is helping them to work on this concern and how. But we recognize that there's far more ways that a theological school brings together a community, and it's that kind of community formation that's really important. And one of the things, of course, all of us do in the religious world is we like to eat together. And so I'm sure many of you have that experience that your students expect you to walk your talk, to teach what you preach. And so we recognize that food services are a very important way that an ethic is embodied in community life. And so that's one place where we recognize that schools will need to work. And in doing that, they not only enable their students to learn a lot more about the connection with food and where it's grown or how it's growing and who's growing it, and those larger kind of economic and justice implications, but also then just ways that communities come together to practice ecological, whether it's the kind of water that's available or the kind of drinks or the kind of utensils that are used. So you can see that under these kind of broader categories are a real range of a variety of things that are ways that a school communicates outside of the classroom, outside of policy statements in some ways, to students, to alums, to faculty, to staff, to a wide range of stakeholders in the community. And so one of the things that we think is important is that that kind of commitment is communicated, and that it is a broad discussion that comes from all members of the community in terms of how they're going to continue this work. And so I don't want to go into the kind of ways that we've been thinking about this, but you can imagine it might be in the dormitories, the kind of events that are held, the kind of public transportation, the kind of carbon offsets. You can already see we've been talking about building and grounds, but those flow over into these kind of notions of community ecological practice. And so the next one. And so in addition to the ones that we just saw in terms of perhaps the food that's served in your refectory or when you cater an event, to the kind of water sources, so that maybe you're not using, depending on bottled water and canned drinks so much. But here are examples: Yale providing their students with shopping bags, reusable water bottles, the important farm to fork faith work at Wake Forest Divinity School. And it was really hard to choose because so many schools now are working on some kind of gardening and farming as a way of really connecting students to the earth and to the products of the earth. I don't want to use the word products, the fruit of the earth that we depend on for survival. But here's another example of Columbia Theological Seminary did a whole program on healthy cleaning and the kind of cleaning products you use. So you can see where that might be under building and grounds, but it also becomes part of a seminary being embedded in its community and reaching out. Now, public leadership, you can see how this is part of it. But public leadership also involves this being part of a school's mission statement. How are you telling the world that this is part of who you are? And so we ask you to develop in a statement. It might not be your school's central mission statement. I've been on those committees that write the mission for the school, and those are hard to change, but some way, a statement that communicates to the rest of the world why you're doing this and how you're doing it and how it fits in with your mission. You've got to be engaged with your board, and so part of it is you're going to have to educate the board about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it fits into the broader school's identity. And we also feel like it's really important that when you make these changes that they become policy and they aren't just dependent on individuals who, when they leave an institution, take that knowledge or that commitment with them, whether it's terms of how your grounds are done, facilities, purchasing, all those things. So to try and incorporate environmental practices into policy. So again, this is part of creating this broader culture and ethos. And here are some examples of ways that schools have gone even more public. Union Theological's decision to divest from fossil fuels to really reflect its commitment on climate change. Here's an example of Drew. A large portion of our community decided to go in and march in the People's Climate March to sort of convey their commitment to that we need the global recognition of the threat of climate. And here's Trinity Lutheran Seminary, who has a commitment to cleaning up a portion of a creek that goes by. And in that way, joining the larger community in sort of demonstrating to the community how they incorporate doing ecological praxis as part of their theological and their faith statements. So I think that gives you a sense, as we said, that this is much more spelled out in a larger sort of understanding of guidelines and things that will be becoming available. And so I'm now turning it over to someone to talk about the pilot cohort.
Thanks, Laurel. So Sarah Macias is helping us oversee the incoming pilot cohort for this program, and we're just at the point now of identifying schools that would be interested in being part of that for the launch of this program. So Sarah, welcome. Thanks for all your work, and share with everybody how that's going to work.
Thanks, Fletcher. Well, we hope that everyone that's on this webinar up to this point is not only interested, but excited about this certification process, and perhaps even the possibility of participating as part of the pilot cohort. So just a few more slides, and then it looks like we'll have some time for questions and answers. We will have an application period that will open up here very soon from April 15th until June 15th. We will be accepting applications from seminaries and theological schools that are interested in being a part of this pilot cohort. The first thing to do, of course, we talked earlier in the webinar here about how certain schools often have just one or two champions, where you that are listening in are probably that champion. But there may be some other possible champions that would be part of a green team that would be involved not only in the certification process, but in this application process. So the first thing is creating that team. This team needs to represent a range of experiences, basically the key stakeholders in your seminary community: faculty, staff, students, administration, committing to this up to 3-year process. Now, we recognize that seminary communities are different than congregations. So particularly with students who are going to graduate and are unlikely to be able to commit to a 3-year process, we recognize that you're going to have some vacancies that come up. But we do expect the school would fill those vacancies as soon as possible, as soon as they're able to, so that we can ensure student involvement. There is a green team commitment form even for people to sign that they're agreeing to participate in that process. This green team will be going through the standards and guidelines together within that April 15th to June 15th period, reading those more thoroughly than we're able to explain them to you in this webinar, and looking through those more closely, seeing the consistency that is provided in the standards and guidelines, and yet some flexibility to allow you to customize it according to the strengths of your particular community. There is an enrollment fee also. I think it's on the previous slide there, Fletcher. An enrollment fee of $1,500 that would be expected upon acceptance into the program. Now, this is a reduced amount for the pilot cohort. When the certification program begins with the next batch of seminaries, it's expected that the enrollment fee would be $3,000, but due to some generous funders and support that we've received, we're able to provide the reduced amount to the pilot cohort, with the understanding that we're really going to be working together in collaboration with this 5 to 7 seminaries in this pilot cohort, getting feedback from them on how to improve the process, getting input from them on some resources that they perhaps stumble upon that we haven't even discovered yet. So resources are going to be available as part of the support offered to these 5 to 7 seminaries in this pilot cohort group, but we're going to be learning together and improving the process together with your help with the pilot cohorts. The next slide. So again, the application period is April 15th to June 15th. There is an application form, and all of these support documents, along with this slide deck and this recording of this webinar, are going to be provided to all who registered for this webinar. The application will be simple. We will, asking each school why they want to participate in the pilot cohort, we're going to ask for, what are some examples of your school's environmental initiatives or activities within the last 5 years, and what particular experience or expertise your school might be able to offer to other schools in this pilot cohort process as you work together as part of this peer group. Have you had solar installations? Have you had experience with integrating environmental justice into your courses? Do you already have any green purchasing policies? So those are some of the questions, just to kind of get a feel for what your school might have to offer and what you're interested in, why you're interested in being a part of it. There will be an audit, just like Stacy had mentioned earlier. There will be a reflection of the standards and guidelines. And in case there are questions, but there's bound to be questions, as you and your green team engage in the process together, we will offer a conference call that we're going to schedule on Wednesday, May 11th, from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock to answer questions. And then after June 15th, we'll be reviewing those applications with the anticipation that we'll announce the names of the pilot cohort seminaries by mid-July. Like we already mentioned, this is possible through this new and wonderful partnership that Green Seminary has with Drew Theological School, which has been our home base for several years, and our new partner, Green Faith, particularly because they've had such a successful congregational certification program. Now they're able to help us develop and launch this seminary environmental certification, and we're very excited about this particular program and other possibilities from that relationship. But again, all of the materials are going to be made available to you following this webinar, probably tomorrow, and they'll also be made available on our Green Seminary Initiative website and the Green Faith website. We have a Green Seminary email, greenseminary@drew.edu, that is checked daily. If you have questions or comments that haven't been addressed today, please send those in so that we can work with you on seeing if this is a good fit for your community and helping us make this a great program.
Great, thanks very much, Sarah. And this gives us a little bit of time to respond to the questions that have come in through the chat function. As many of you may have seen, we've been responding to those via text during the course of the webinar, but I'll lift up now some of the themes that seem to run through some of the questions and invite different speakers to respond to those. There've been a couple of questions about who is it within a seminary world that ought to be part of the certification team, and a question about the role not only of students and administration and faculty, but of local clergy, of other stakeholders. Stacy, I'm wondering if you might speak for a few moments about what you've seen be the most effective certification team members at the congregational level, and then Laurel and Beth perhaps can say a little bit about the range of folks that might get involved in this from the seminary level.
Sure. So it's a really good question and an important one, because of course this team is in charge of getting this work done. You want to make sure on the team, and what we've seen on the congregational level, to have those that are influential in the community, those that are key stakeholders. But those may not always be the same people that can come to every meeting or really get the hard work done. So you need to have a mix, both of those that are influential and those that are able to commit the hours and the time and the energy to this work. This can be hard work, as any of us know, and requires consistent effort. So you want to have that good mix of those that can be the movers and shakers, and those that really can just get the nuts and bolts done.
Great. Laurel and Beth, any thoughts about I think within the standards and materials that we'll be sharing publicly quite soon, folks will see that there's a very sort of wide net that we encourage seminaries to cast in terms of different stakeholders to involve on a certification team. But Laurel and Beth, you've both been within the seminary world for quite some number of years. Any thoughts that you'd share on this?
This is Beth. I would just say that from the standpoint of Wesley Seminary here in DC, it's been very important to have a range of people involved who represent different functions within the school. The faculty are obviously very, very important. It's also really important to have the buildings and grounds people, and as well the dean, in our case himself, involved, who really helps to set academic policy. And the students that we've had, even though they come and go, the students prod and push and remind us why we're doing this. So I would say a wide range of functionality represented on the Green team.
Laurel Kearns coming in. One of the things we recognize is that there's a big difference between a freestanding school and a school that's attached, that's part of a larger university. So for instance, at Drew, I've been part of our university-wide Green team for about 18 years, and that's got really key staff, facilities people on it, deans of student life, students from all the different schools. And so you may not need to replicate all of that on your Green team that's for your specific school, because some of those issues will be discussed at these other tables. But at the same time, we recognize that then you might also have some subgroups. So it is very important to involve your alums and the denominational or the key sort of congregations that you work with, because you're going to want to form some of those partnerships. But again, the really key elements are to make sure you've got staff. And I know at my school, if I didn't have the administrative support staff on board, they're the ones that sort of, help me think through the whole way the school operates and to keep things going, to help events happen. So, variety of components of staff, students, faculty, and administration are at least the essential ones. And then I think schools will figure out, you might have some key alums that can really help you think about it, board members that are really crucial. So we will work with you on making sure you've got a Green team that represents your school and will help you to get this work done.
And Laurel, perhaps to continue with you, I think it would respond to something that's implicit in several of the questions that were shared. If you could say a little bit about the holistic nature of the program, the fact that it engages issues of spirituality, of social justice in relationship to the environment, as well as sustainable consumption. Perhaps say a little bit about the holistic nature of how we've approached this and how the Green Seminary Initiative thinks about these issues.
Well, that's one of the reasons I think it's really important that we are working with seminaries and theological schools. And we're not, there are programs out there that exist for working with universities, with various things. But one of the things I think we all know that who are involved in theological education is that this is about the whole person, and this is about our whole lives, that our theological education, our service, our commitment to various forms of ministry aren't something that are separate, but they're something that involve all facets of life. And so a program just that aims at, different courses being taught or different content being put into the curriculum is not really getting at this, because this is about far more than how we think or what we know. It's also about how we act in the world, how we act together. And so that holistic approach has been central since the beginning. And I think, as I said earlier, we also know that students pay a lot of attention on whether we're walking our talk, on whether an institution embodies its values, embodies its mission. And we all spend a lot of time thinking about that. How are the various programs that we have, the various opportunities, the various internships, all of those things part of this broader vision we have of theological education. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Well, this is Fletcher. I sort of speak not as someone who's officially affiliated with a seminary, but rather as someone who benefited from a seminary education at Union Theological Seminary that was very intentional, as any number of seminaries are, about making sure that in all areas of seminary training and education that we understood the multifaceted nature of how to engage being a person of faith, being a religious leader, and engaging public issues. And so I think that we're committed to making sure that this program reflects that kind of approach. We know that individual behavior change is vital. We know that system change is vital. We know that faith communities have a critical role to play in both of those areas, and we know that seminaries can equip students with the schools to make change happen. So I think I'd add that. I'm wondering, in response to questions, a couple of questions that have come in from our good friend, Dr. Larry Rasmussen, if Beth, you might speak a little bit with some support from Laurel about the nature of the interaction and conversation that the Green Seminary Initiative has had with the Association of Theological Schools, which of course is the accrediting body for theological schools, seminaries, divinity schools in the U.S. and North America.
Sure. I just responded to Larry and others on that particular point. We've been working with ATS now, I guess, Laurel, for 5 or 6 years now. They move very cautiously and methodically and take their certification requirements very, very seriously. One of the, aside from the certification, another thing that really popped in these surveys that we did when we asked folks how could we make a difference when we raised ATS, there was almost to a person a little bit of a laugh, and then said, well, yes, of course. If ATS was more engaged, then certainly we would be as well. And that would give us a lot of impetus for movement. So we are working with them. We were invited to give a presentation last summer to their deans and presidents meeting. That went very well. We are in conversation. They've had an article in their magazine, their periodical magazine, about it. It's just very, very slow. But we believe that they will get there.
Great. A question came in about the topic of maintaining certification status in good standing, if you will, for a school after the 3-year process is completed. And what we can say to that at this point is that we know that it's going to be necessary and something that we'll ask seminaries to do, but we're in the process of determining exactly what the right way to go about that will be. All of these standards that you heard about today were ones that were developed with direct feedback and input from actual leaders at various seminaries. So these were not just standards that emerged out of a vacuum. They were developed in collaboration with leaders in the field. And so we're now at the point of having some conversations about what should that ongoing activity look like, and what should we ask seminaries to do. So we'll have more details about that. And to reinforce something that Sarah mentioned, during the pilot cohort, we anticipate that the pilot cohort will consist of somewhere between 5 and 7 or 8 seminaries around the country. And we do look forward to working in a unique kind of way with that pilot cohort, since they'll be the first schools through the process. We know from experience that we'll benefit greatly from their input and their guidance, and that we'll end up modifying and shaping the program anew in response to suggestions and real life experience that comes from working with them. So another question, and perhaps Stacy might be good for you to respond to this. If you could talk a little bit more about the importance of the the getting started process, and what types of activities and what types of challenges and evolution within institutions have you seen with institutions as they've gotten started with a certification process?
So I think, as you saw in the getting started slides, many of the beginning steps are about the auditing and the action plan and the building of a team and kind of the fundamental building blocks to get to the more creative and interesting requirements, I think, of the program that Beth and Laurel in particular went through. And, some of the challenges that may come at that beginning stage is really building the energy and the momentum and the buy-in of various stakeholders within the community, and making sure that process of the auditing and of the action planning and the team is as inclusive as possible, which you heard Laurel and Beth also describe. If you're able to build up that inclusiveness, it allows the requirements, and also build up a really good action plan and gather good data. It allows the requirements to flow very freely out of that and to be done very successfully. But I would say that kind of ramp up period is always the most challenging. And to be quite frank, I think the auditing process is an absolutely critical one, but it's not the most fun part of the process. It takes some work, and it's a lot of really difficult questions you need to use to assess your community and the work that you've done and need to do. So I think it's, maintaining that energy and then really doing a great job at developing those planning tools are vital to having good success with the requirements.
And Stacy, perhaps say a little bit also about we mentioned during the course of the slides that we'd ask participating schools to share progress reports 3 times a year, every 4 months. Say a little bit, if you will, about how what you've seen as the benefit of that kind of periodic reporting that you've administered and led so well with congregations. What comes out of that process?
Sure. So the reporting process at first can seem as if it's just a way to check in with us, but really the true benefit of the reporting is that it allows you to benchmark for yourself as you go along where you are at in the process, how you've done in the prior 4 months, because as we mentioned, you sort of check in with us every 4 months. So it's a way to really kind of assess for yourself how things are moving along, and also to have really good records of what you've done. So if there is a really good syllabi that has been offered, you have a record of that, and you are able to use that again and again, or offer that out to the wider community and to other schools in the program. So it's just a really beneficial way of, again, kind of doing your own internal benchmarking and determining piece by piece where you're at and where the energy is going.
Great. Thanks. Well, we're right close to the end of our time together. And what I'd like to do is to invite Sarah, anything just on the process of and on the level of the submitting the application materials. Could you orient folks again to how that process will work as a way of wrapping up? And I'll be scrolling through to get to the proper slide for that.
Sure. If you go to the Green Seminary Initiative website, and the Green Faith website at some point, I'm not sure when that will be up, but the Green Seminary Initiative website has the application material, the Green Team commitment form, and these will also be sent to you along with the recording of this webinar and the slide deck. The standards and guidelines are not up yet, but they will be in a few days. So those will be available certainly before April 15th, so that when you have your Green Team formed, or at least forming, you can start looking more thoroughly at those standards and guidelines. So that's what will be, what we will need to have in hand is the application, which will be signed by the dean and the president, or whatever whatever those, depending on whatever those leadership roles are in your particular institution. There is a Green Team commitment form that will actually be signed by each of your Green Team members. We'd like to see that also by April 15th, by June 15th. And then that's it. That's what we're going to need by June 15th, but just your commitment and awareness that there will be some other requirements upon selection, like the enrollment fee of $1,500, and then starting from in the first stage of the process, which will be September until April, that's when you'll start really hitting the ground running with looking at the audit and developing an action plan, as well as finding the right time for your leadership to actually put in writing a board resolution, which will have a sample, but you can customize depending on the language of your particular community that kind of shows a level of commitment from your leadership and all of your community that you may want to present in some kind of public forum, perhaps a worship service that would make it a very meaningful and defining time for your community as you're engaging in this process and moving forward.
Great, thanks, Sarah, and many thanks to Laurel and Beth and Stacy. Thanks to all of you who listened in on this webinar and to those who are listening to the recording. As Laurel and Beth highlighted in their last textual post, please remember that the Green Seminary Initiative is more than the certification program. For many years, the GSI has been sharing curricula and bringing leaders from seminaries together in common cause around these concerns. And it's an important mission and one that we all believe in very deeply. There will be for those institutions that are submitting an application for the Seminary Environmental Certification Program, there will be a conference call where program staff will be available to answer any questions that applying institutions might have, and that'll be on Wednesday, May 11th from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll send out the call-in information about that so that anybody who's interested can take part. Thanks again to everybody for joining us today. We look forward to working with you as this program moves forward. And thanks very much for your commitment to protecting God's creation. Take care and bye-bye now.